What is up, diecast racing fans? This is the Nitro series on the HSL Diecast Racing channel. We got a special treat for you today. We got short track racing under the lights at Isip Speedway, the smallest track in NASCAR history. It's a short track, slow speeds, lots of beating and banging. Who knows what's going to happen? But what I do know is going to be a lot of bent sheet metal and a lot of angry drivers. And here we kick it off with segment 1. Jeremy Mayfield and Ross Chastain starting next to each other, two of the fastest cars in the series. And Ross Chastain takes a tumble from the start gate. He's bouncing across the track and lands on his roof. So does Jeremy Mayfield. He flips coming out of turn 2. That's a huge El Reco, a double DNF for the segment favorites. Bubba Wallace crosses the line in first, but everyone's eyes are on the series points leader, Ross Chastain. He's going to be credited with a very poor finish this week. As you can see him on his roof, the camera pans over to him on his roof. That could be an enormous blow to Ross Chastain's point lead, depending on how Jimmy and Sterling Marlin and Alan Kulwicki finish in this race. Well, anyway, we're moving on to lap 2. Bubba Wallace is going to lead him to the start. Richard Petty next to him, and Elmo Langley in third. We haven't seen him in a while. It's his first start in quite a few races. And the gates come down. Bubba Wallace gets a push from Elmo Langley past Richard Petty, and Langley cannot get by him too. Richard Petty trying to make a move, but Bubba Wallace is a little too fast for him. Now it's time for lap 3. The positions haven't changed at all. The gates are down. Bubba Wallace gets a slightly better start than Petty again, but Petty's not giving up. Richard Petty taps Wallace's quarter panel. Bubba Wallace gets a little loose, but he manages to hold his block and keep Richard Petty from passing him. He'll have the lead coming into the final lap of this segment. It's been a two-man race so far to get into the main event between Bubba Wallace and Richard Petty. Both of them are fighting to stay in the top 12 in points. Elmo Langley just riding around, happy to be here. And Richard Petty gets past Wallace on the outside. And Wallace must have used up the last bit of his energy on Richard Petty in the last lap, because he's got nothing for him. And Richard Petty is going to the main event. And he really needed that after a long string of DNFs, including a dead last place finish at Indianapolis. Next, segment 2. On the pole for this segment is Vinny Nightlife. Next to him is Ricky Rudd. Behind them is Sterling Marlin and Johnson Jr. And there's David Green driving the Rusty Wallace car for this race. And a caution is out for an El Reco. Ricky Rudd takes a tumble and he ends up off the track and on his roof. It holds up half the field. Johnson Jr. takes advantage of that, and he's going to be lining up next to Vinny Nightlife on the front row. As you can see the wreckage there, Sterling Marlin's off the track too. He'll be lining up in fourth. And the gates are down, and Vinny Nightlife's a little bit unsteady, but he recovers. Johnson Jr. slips past him to take the lead, but Sterling Marlin can't get by. And Johnson Jr., making just his second NASCAR Nitro Series start, will be leading the pack down with just 2 laps to go. And the gates are down for lap 3. It looks like David Green gets under Vinny Nightlife, and he won't be able to make an attempt to pass Johnson Jr. as Johnson Jr. speeds away from the rest of the pack heading out of turn 2. And that's a lightning fast lap for Johnson Jr., who's just 1 lap away from his very first main event appearance. And now it's time for the final lap. Vinny Nightlife gets another bad start there, gets tossed into the air by the start gate. Johnson Jr. is running away with it, and it looks like Sterling Marlin's going to get around him for second. Johnson Jr. to the very first main event of his career, Sterling Marlin to the seconds race. It's a good points day for him in light of Ross Chastain's wreck. And Vinny's got to claw his way back now from the thirds race. And now for our third segment, we have Todd Bodine on the pole next to him. Bill Elliott, who got a podium in his first race in the new casting. Behind them is Kaz Grala and Alan Kulwicki, a couple of race winners this season, and Ricky Craven, who's been on the downturn lately. For the first lap, Todd Bodine runs away with it, and it's a close race for second and fourth. Kaz Grala edges out Bill Elliott for second place, and Kulwicki slides past Craven for fourth. The way they're lined up for lap 2, it's going to be an interesting battle between Bill Elliott, Kaz Grala, and Todd Bodine. Those 3 cars are very similar castings, and Todd Bodine gets a bit of a challenge from Kaz Grala, but holds him off and pulls away from him. He's going to lead lap 2, and looks like there's a yellow flag for an El Reco. Bill Elliott flips over coming out of turn 2, kind of an unforced error by himself. You can see the damage there. He is on his roof out of the race, kind of pushes Alan Kulwicki off the edge. And it looks like Kulwicki's going to run down this lap upside down. Pulling a trick out of Ross Chastain's book and seeing if he could make a move on the 2 leaders. The gates are down and Ricky Craven gets under Todd Bodine, knocks Todd Bodine loose. Bodine kind of recovers off screen. It's a tight race between him and Kaz Grala. And Kaz Grala steals it on the outside, which is really the inside because the track is running in the opposite direction. But yeah, Kaz Grala beats him by half a car length and just in time for the final lap where Grala is now going to have the advantage. They've basically flipped sides as the gates are down and Todd Bodine gets loose again. Ricky Craven knocks him loose and pushes him over. He is on his roof and out of the race. And Kaz Grala is going to run away with it. Kaz Grala to his 3rd straight main event. Some strategic and spiteful blocking by Todd Bodine despite being on his roof, letting Alan Kulwicki push past Craven and kind of use him as a brake, and that ensures Craven goes to the 3rds race for what seems to be our first ever case of a driver getting his revenge while upside down on the track. And now it's time for our final segment. In the front row, we've got Johnny Benson and Jeff Fuller. Behind them, Swervin Irvan and our Daytona 500 Jimmy, and qualifying in last place on points is Pete Hamilton, who had such a hot start to the season but has now looked like the worst driver in the Nitro Series for several weeks now. And it seems that nothing has changed. Pete Hamilton is on his roof again, and so is Jeff Fuller. And based on where they qualified compared to the other Lap 1 records, those are your 19th and 20th place finishers. It was actually a closer contest than it seemed between Swervin Irvan and Johnny Benson. Johnny Benson keeping the upper hand over Irvan, but everyone's attention seemed to be on the chaos behind him. Jimmy crosses the line in 3rd, continuing to ride around in the back of segments and trying to avoid DNFs, which have plagued him lately. It is time for lap 2, and I'm not sure if Swervin Irvan wants to be in 2nd place here, since he's got nobody to push him, nobody to draft with, and it's a battle for 2nd place between Irvan and Jimmy. Looks like Jimmy's going to take the upper hand in that battle as Johnny Benson is running away with it. And with Jimmy and Swervin Irvan fighting each other to go into the 2nd race, it doesn't look like anybody has anything for Johnny Benson heading into lap 3. The gates are down and Jimmy just shoots out of there like a bat out of hell. Look at him. He's got a full car length lead already. He's not even into the fat track yet. He just comes out of nowhere and rockets out of the gates with nobody pushing him. A much lighter car than Johnny Benson. Just comes out of nowhere to take the lead heading into the final lap, and now he has a pusher. This final segment is getting hot. Jimmy's trying to break a long streak of DNFs and get back into the points hunt. Johnny Benson's been to so many main events, still looking for that first career win. Jimmy gets a huge lead. Swervin Irvan passes Johnny Benson for 2nd. Benson comes back. Jimmy's running away with it, and it's Jimmy back into the main event. Johnny Benson recovers for 2nd, and now it is time for the 3rds and 4ths race. On your front row is Swervin Irvan and Vinny Nightlife, qualified 2nd overall for this event, and caution is out for an El Reco. Couldn't even get done introducing the rest of the drivers. Swervin Irvan swerved a little bit too much coming out of the gate, and now he is out of the race. Elmo Langley comes out of nowhere for 2nd. He's going to try and get himself into the 2nds race and into the top 10. He's going to have to pass a very fast car in Vinny Nightlife, though. Dave Green and Ricky Craven behind them. Craven's got a much heavier car to give him a push. It still could be anyone's race if someone on the front row wrecks. And the gates are down, and it looks like Elmo Langley's rear axle explodes as the fast lane takes off like a spaceship, and Vinny Nightlife has nobody to challenge him to head into the 2nds race. And he gets some style points by sliding across the finish line. He knows he's going to win, and he makes sure he's looking good doing it. So now it's time for the 2nds race. We have on the front row, both of them looking for a trip into the main event to try and get their first career win. We have Bubba Wallace and Johnny Benson. Behind them, a couple of race winners, Sterling Marlin and Alan Kulwicki. Marlin being 2nd in points. He's trying to make up as much ground on Ross Chastain as he can, who had a first lap El Reco and will be credited with 17th place. Horrible points day for Chastain, and looks like Vinny Nightlife slid onto his side somehow. Not much contact starting in the back row, but he'll have to wait for his first career main event appearance as Sterling Marlin makes it up to 2nd place, and he will be the car to beat, but Kulwicki gets underneath him. Sterling Marlin holds on and recovers and uses Kulwicki as a launching pad, and Nobody's going to catch him. He's got a good 5 or 6 car length lead. Nobody else even comes close, and Marlin does exactly what he needs to do to chip away at Ross's points lead. And now it is time for the main event. On the front row, you see Johnson Jr. in his first ever main event. Kaz Grala, Jimmy, Sterling Marlin, Richard Petty. All of them have at least one podium. Bunch of guys with race wins, and the rookie holds him off. You see Jimmy got around Kaz Grala for second. Starting lap 2, he'll be in a good position to compete for his second career win. He's got a fast car pushing him. But Johnson Jr., he's just unstoppable today. As the other drivers are fighting each other behind him, he's got a car length lead over Kaz Grala. Jimmy goes off the track and falls back to 5th. Sterling Marlin moves up to 3rd. And he'll be in a good spot starting behind the dominant car, being able to draft off of him, has a pusher. And Johnson Jr. comes away with another clean lap. For lap 3, it's Grala and Marlin racing each other. And looks like Grala punts Marlin into the wall, and Marlin has to block the other drivers to prevent himself from falling further behind. The battle for every possible point is getting tighter and tighter, and none of these guys are holding anything back today. Johnson Jr., Kaz Grala, Marlin, Petty, and Jimmy in 5th, heading into the final lap. Now the gates are down. Once again, Johnson Jr. has a lot of clean air, and Grala and Marlin are fighting each other for second place, and Marlin gets a huge surge of speed coming out of turn 2 and almost beats Johnson Jr. to the line. Look at this still of the finish here. Johnson Jr. in his second ever start in the NASCAR Nitro Series beats out a field of heavyweights in the main event and scores his first career win at Islip Speedway. What an exciting finish. Look at that. Barely beat him by a bumper, and here is your podium. Sterling Marlin and Kaz Grala make up your podium, and that is like your 3rd straight main event appearance for Kaz Grala. He's got a win in there, but enough talking about him. It's safe to say he's not an underdog anymore. Today's all about Johnson Jr., his very first career win in just his second start. Began his career mid-season and just shot himself up into the top 12 in points at the expense of Bubba Wallace, who didn't actually have a bad race, but here is your final race results. Johnson Jr., Marlin, Grala, Jimmy, and Richard Petty make up your main event, and it was clean racing the whole way. Richard Petty really needed those points too. As you go down the list, you can see where Ross Chastain lost a lot of points on his points lead. Now only has a 128-point lead after having a nearly 200-point lead coming into the race. Jimmy makes up some ground too with his good finish. Kulwicki, Bodine, Johnny Benson, Kaz Grala up to 7th after being dead last a couple races ago. And that W puts Johnson Jr. into the top 12, guarantees him a spot in the next race. 5 points over Bubba Wallace. And if you take a look at the back markers here, Vinny Nightlife and Dave Green and Elmo Langley all moved up a couple spots because of their decent finishes. Not a lot of other action here. A lot of the usual suspects continue their DNQ streaks. And I have a couple of big announcements. The first is that I will be hosting a mail-in series, a lot like Rhino's ADRC, and it'll be sanctioned on the Redline Derby website. Keep an eye out for the sign-up link in future videos. In the meantime, if you want to send in a car, it's got to be a make and model used in NASCAR. For you JDM guys, you can get away with a GR Supra because they use them in the Xfinity Series. Pretty much any make or model that's been used in NASCAR Cup Series or Busch Series, Xfinity Series competition. It's got to have a number on either the hood or the roof or the doors, or at least 2 out of the 3. And you can send your cars to HSL Diecast Racing, P.O. Box number 7, Wind Gap, Pennsylvania, 18091. That is P.O. Box 7, Wind Gap, PA, 18091. And as always, remember to hit that like button, drop a comment, and if you haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button. Can't wait to see what kind of cars you create. And as always, see yous out there on the track.